There we go. But what we want to speak to you tonight is about this particular cadre of young people who start off college with all the indications that they're bound for success. They have the GPAs, the SAT scores, the activities, everything that would say this person is bound for success. But something happens along the way, and upwards to 40%, some say more, of those who have ADHD failed their first semester. And after this first foray, they only a relative few will attempt another semester. Not everybody tries a second time. And of those who do try, fewer still will complete college on schedule.
So do you want me to start this slideshow? Because it sounds like you already just took out the gate with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Go ahead.
Okay, let's get this party started and get that slideshow going.
Oh, I see. I have the slideshow here, so I just figured everyone could see this.
No. It just started now. If anyone has any audio or video issues, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get everything ironed out as best we can. So without further ado, oh, geez. Okay. And that's what you just said.
Yes.
And then there's this.
So the natural curiosity is what causes these students to fail? And what we've looked at, Pam and I, for the last decades, many years, is what are the common denominators of their failure? And most importantly, what can be done to redirect these students? Once we learn what the common ground is, what's the common ground of success that will lead them out of failure? Next slide.
It's next slide.
So go ahead and talk about this one, Pam.
Take it away. Don't you love this like free and easy kind of lecture tonight? So they're lacking in the following life skills, which are the hallmarks of people with ADHD. Everybody with ADHD struggles with executive function, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. And so those are the three major struggles that ADHDers have in their lives.
And within those, there's several different skill sets, life skill sets that fall within these three areas that we see coming up again and again. We know, like for example, executive function, the problems with organization, time management, emotional intelligence, anxiety, depressions, stress reactions are often comorbid with ADHD. But in addition to these numerous life skills in the three categories, what is missing that we want to talk about tonight and focus on more than any of the other areas is an overarching self-awareness that enables them to monitor and manage themselves in these three areas. In other words, an ability to step outside and look back and see, how am I doing in these areas? What are these mistakes that I'm making? And how do I not only monitor this stuff, but how do I manage it a good way?
Mm-hmm.
So we call this capacity to monitor and manage anti-fragile. I didn't make the name up, but I wish I had. It's a wonderful term. There's a economist named Hassan Nicholas Taleb, who wrote a wonderful book I recommend called, you see below here, Anti-Fragile Systems That Grow from Failure. And in this book, he talks about different states of being. One is with fragile, resilient, and anti-fragile are the three that I like to grab and apply to ADHD land. Fragile is illustrated like a candle in the wind. The wind blows and the candle goes out. And there's times to be fragile, like in times of grief and loss. Fragile is what we want to experience. Resilient is more like a campfire lantern. It's the wind blows and nothing happens. So there's times to be resilient. Anti-fragile, though, is this sort of a magical way of being. It's more like a bonfire. And this looks like a bonfire at our retreat center. In fact, the more the wind blows, the brighter that the fire gets. So we like to think of the idea of anti-fragile as being a very, very important skill set to have in your tool bag.
So through self-awareness, being anti-fragile, it provides students can avert failure and recover from failure more rapidly and make better meaning of failure when it occurs. Failure is inevitable, and it's going to be something that everyone will have to face, and how to face and be anti-fragile in a failure mode is really important, instead of making meaning that instead of I failed, that I'm a failure.
So we want to put this to get this across to you graphically and step by step. And again, the whole idea is that averting failure, recovering from it, because we know failure is going to happen, but to get out of it quickly, and then when it happens, make better meaning of it. So just from the get-go, just from the outside looking in, this is what failure looks like through the eyes of a parent or yeah, let's just say a parent. They're checking in with the student from the beginning of the semester. Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's going good. You keep checking in. How's this? How's that? Yeah, everything's fine. Then suddenly, say around November, 1st of November, the alarm bells come on, and it's suddenly like, oh, I can't, there's no way I'm going to be able to pass this course or that course, or I'm really in a bad place here. And it looks from the outside looking in that everything was going fine, and then it just dropped off all of a sudden. But in reality, it's more like this. Students start off successful at the beginning. We start off with an A every semester. But what happens is that little by little, the failure begins in real insidiously by something like maybe missing a class or not doing well on a test. And piece by piece, the student starts going down this slippery slope. So then by the time failure is evident, there's many, many steps that have preceded this that could have been interrupted. So what we want to talk about in breaking this down, just for starters though, is that students fail and succeed in recurring patterns. That if as we look back, we can reconstruct through a student's history the specific structure of how they succeeded or failed. And these are patterns that are brought forward until they're acted upon and are altered. And the other part of this is that these indicators begin very early in the semester, and they go unnoticed oftentimes until people start bringing some self-awareness and attention to them. Secondly, students need to learn to identify and make use of the patterns. Pam, go ahead with the rest of that. This is in your purview. As you're working with a student as a coach, these are the kind of things that happen, that pop up, and that you bring into the conversation.
Yes, understanding patterns and indicators is helping that the student understand what's going on early and before things get out of control, like an early warning system. We're going to talk about how to use that graph or chart that we just showed. It's going to get more complicated, but it's going to get more obvious and more helpful. So say a student is in their beginning of their semester, and they have indicators that things are going well. We're going to run through those. And then there are indicators when things are not going well. And the more that the student can identify, understand, and monitor these early warning signs of when their classes are not going well, when they're not bringing themselves to their academics, when they're unable to have a life-work balance, when anxiety, depression is coming into play, that's going to inhibit them from being a better student. Those are the things that I work on with my students as a coach, and to help them be more aware to step away from themselves and take a look back and say, I see something going a little off. How can I fix this early and before it gets too much down the slippery slope? So, but before, anything, they can alter any patterns, they have to discover what those patterns are. And that's what the chart does. That's what the success curve does, is help them discover more about themselves and how they show up, and when they start not showing up in academics and also other situations at school.
So this next slide, we break it down into 3 zones. Oops, I thought we had the curve up. Oh, let's see.
I can go back.
No, that's okay. This will work. We break it into 3 zones. Zone 1 is when students are doing fine. This is the success part of the success curve. Zone 2 is when things start slipping. Zone 3, that's when failure is inevitable. It's going to happen. So we start off by saying, when a student's doing well, we want to know what they're doing, how they're doing well. Questions like, how are you doing that? What's working for you? How are you making A's on things? What are the kind of day-to-day habits that you're doing? We think of it as product and process. Product is the outcome. It's the grade that you're making. It's the course that you complete or the project that's completed. Process is how you bring yourself to it. So for example, I had one kid that was making all A's, and I said, that's a great product. How do you do that? He says, well, I cheat. I said, well, that's a very bad process. And for a lot of reasons, it's a bad process. But we want to know how they're doing it. At the very beginning, want to get a sense of what's working, because that's what you want to keep reinforcing. Now we're jumping into zone 2. This is where the slippery slope begins. And it's again, it's always something, it's usually something simple. One of the common ones that we hear, and this is a painful one, it's like a student says, yeah, I was doing pretty good. I'm making an A in this class. I figure I deserve to cut a class. And it's like, well, what's the consequences of cutting the class on that day? Not so much. But what if it's like suddenly, there was something that was talked about as far as assignment in the next class, and I don't know it. I didn't get that information. And so now I'm feeling a little bit nervous about not knowing, and I get the assignment, I look at it, I don't know how to get started on it, know how to do it. It brings in a whole new layer of other stressors that make it maybe hard to attend the next class. And so over time in our work, we've come up with, like in zone 2, these are the kind of things that, Pam and I see all the time when we say, how did this failure happen? We know here we are in zone 3. We know you failed this course. Let's back it up now. Look at what was the earliest warning sign that let you know something was amiss? And they'll usually start somewhere. Oh, I started like maybe I was late on assignments. I was missing assignments, or, okay, well, let's go back. What led to you missing those assignments? And then what happened before that? So we can get all the way up to the top to where they were successful, and get every one of these sequence steps that led to their downfall in a course. Now, that's good information, right? But what do we do with it is most important.
I'd like to also say that anybody in the audience can be looking at this and saying, well, I would not having a calendar is not my top indicator that things are going awry. It'd be more like missing assignments or so forth. This is just sort of an example that I put together based off of many different students that I coached. If you don't know what's going on, you can't really address it. So if you don't know what's going on Canvas, you don't understand where to find your materials, and you're not keeping current with what is going on with your classes and being able to monitor that with a calendar or planner, it's going to be hard. You can't keep it all in your head. I know a lot of students say, I just keep it all in my head. And I'm thinking, no, that doesn't sound like it's going to go well. Not that you're not smart, but that's a lot to carry. The other one thing that I noted is that a lot of times students will be, especially in freshman year, very shy about going to talk to the professor in the beginning and introducing themselves. It seems like really a weird thing to have to do, and maybe they're not comfortable talking to adults or authority figures or a professor. But it's so important to find some way of reaching out that's comfortable for them, because it's really important for them to have that interaction with their professors, especially if they have accommodations, so that they can say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm going to be working really hard in your class. I have accommodations, and just talking that through. And they've already introduced themselves. They've shown that they're interested in the material. They want to be a good student, and they have a disability, and they're going to be reaching out. It's such a great thing. And I think professors very much appreciate a student like that. And the other parts are pretty
Zone
obvious.
one thing, isn't it?
What?
What zone would that be in, Pam? Where would you be recommending a student do that?
Well, if they're not using supports and accommodations, it would probably be the antidote to the second one that I have on the list.
Okay, but to the point of you were speaking to earlier about like learning how students are successful, what they do that creates success, we might want to even bring this in the at the very beginning of the semester and say, hey, here's something you can do before you even have any indications that things are going south.
Yes, of course. A lot of times the students that are getting ready for college, do a lot of research, or they have mentors or other people that can help them with that. There's different organizations and businesses that help line students up for success. And then I'm a coach. So a lot of times I'm coaching people who are in high school who want to put these various things into play so that they're ready when launching. And from the things that I've learned from my experience and also from my students, I always say, hey, these are some best practices from other college students that learned from their mistakes or found some good strategies. Would you like to hear about them? Yes, I would. And then we talk about how important it is to set yourself up for success in the beginning. Since we're talking about recovering from the first semester failure, and we're looking at if somebody had failed their first semester, what could they use to improve? This would be definitely easy time. But since we're talking about recovery, that would be the things that I would want them to bring themselves to. I would encourage them to. So that's that.
So Pam, I think we kind of talked through the next two slides. The last slide, we're talking about, the indicators of these early warning indicators, but what's most important is that there's some sort of an antidote or something that can be done to in response to finding this early indicator that the student's going down the slipping down toward failure. Mm-hmm. And so before, what we do is, like, before students get away to college, before they even begin the semester, we will use this particular, what we call the success curve with them. And we'll have them do as we had in the last slide, give us all the indicators. We'll talk through all the indicators and sequence those so that we know how this person has been failing. And then at that same time, we'll start brainstorming. Well, okay, let's go up to the very top here, not paying attention, planning calendar. What would be a good antidote for that? How would you solve that problem? And on, so that for each indicator, there's an antidote that's thought through at the beginning of the semester. Because, like that old saying, when you're up to your butt in alligators, it's hard to remind yourself that the original job was to drain the swamp. It's hard to come up with an antidote when you're in the midst of one of these indicators. And mine just doesn't work quite as well. So setting this up in advance gives this whole sequence of, okay, here's where I am. And when we're checking in with them, where are you on your curve? Well, I'm afraid I'm in zone 2. Where are you on zone 2? Well, I'm at this one where I'm not attending classes regularly. Okay, so there's the antidote. But the problem is, you might need to do some other antidotes before that, because as you can see, I don't know if you can, if you just kind of notice the distance from pick any one of these antidotes, like missing and late assignments. You see how far it is all the way up back to the top? then you compare that to here at the very beginning, not paying attention to planning or calendar. That's just a short distance right there. So it's a real easy antidote right up here when you start at the very top. When you get down here, it's a long way back to the top. It's going to be a stronger kind of an antidote type of behavior. And you may need to do some of the ones that you've skipped over getting to that point.
That's true. So the farther down you go down the slide, the harder it is to get back to the top. And yeah, it's you don't want to go to the bottom of 2 because you're on your way to zone 3, which isn't a good place. So when a student has to is at the bottom of 2, we're at the lower part of this slope, and they do have to, jump through hoops. Maybe they have to, beg the mercy of all their professors and do 5, papers in one night and push to get to, at the end of the semester. The fallout from that, of course, is that I can't advance my slideshow. Okay. Hang on. Sorry, everybody. I'm having a technical issue right here.
Failure. We're
Yeah,
having
failure. My technical failure. I'm supposed to be advancing my slide and it won't go. No.
So
Let me stop share and move it. I don't know what's going on. Hold on a second here.
So
yes.
Pam's looking for this. What we've got is that, students start off in zone 1, they're successful. We want to find out how are they being successful and then support them in that. And then zone 2 is this slope where we get these little indicators that grow the further down they are failure. And we want to help them to develop in advance antidotes for all of these different indicators, because if they don't stop this slide down, to the bottom here, it ultimately ends in the stress, anxiety, and depression of failure. Is it working now, Pam?
Yeah, yes. So
okay.
This one is, the fallout from barely escaping total failure is stress, anxiety, depression, but also it's still a part of the failure part, because it's even worse now. There was no recovery. Pretty much failed out of that semester of school. Maybe the student made it through a couple of classes by the skin of their teeth and is going to have to retake 2 or 3 other classes because now they're on academic probation. So that's zone 3 is a pretty bad place to be, but it is a reality and it is a learning, it is a learning and a teaching moment for that type of experience.
So we've gone through, go ahead and back it up one, Pam, would you? Okay, we've gone through and oops, where's the one with all of the most complicated one? Okay, there we go. So if we what we're wanting to get across here is that there's these different indicators. There's points on the graph, and it very quickly we're just giving you a few of them that we can sort of make up from our memory of working with clients. But each individual success curve, the indicators for success, the indicators for failure can be multitudinous. There can be many more than we have here, very different ones. They're very unique and individual. So what we want to do is to give you an idea of what that looks like in zone 1 and zone 2 before we get to failure, and what can be done about it to, first of all, avert failure from keeping them in zone 1. And if they slip into zone 2, how to pull them back, how they can pull themselves back up into zone 1, and so on, averting pulling themselves out. The deeper they get is a little bit harder, but we want to illustrate that to you graphically. And before we move on to how to deal with failure, might be a good time to open it up to any questions you may have about what we've got here in zone 1 and 2 so far.
Kathy, has there been any questions in the chat thus far about the graph?
There have been no questions about the graph, but one person, well, Wait, we do have now, somebody just put something in. Can you help us understand how a student is supposed to have enough maturity to identify what the antidotes are, or do they need like an adult, a coach, a professor, somebody to help them with that process?
For the most part, yes. Sometimes we can simply, they just need someone who will pose the question. Okay, so, you're not dealing with organizing your classes, and you don't know when things are due. And at the end of the semester, you have a list of what needs to be done. What if you did that at the beginning of the semester? And how would you do that? Sometimes a question like that would pop up an answer with the student to say something like, well, yeah, I guess I could put it in a calendar. Sometimes they need to be encouraged with an idea. And again, it's depending on the level of maturity. But what we think is the more we can keep the problem, that specific problem in its simplicity in front of them, and engage them in problem solving and encourage them and support them as they come up with solutions, they're more likely to follow those solutions. And there's a lot of guiding we do in the asking of questions, powerful questions that can lead them to some solutions. And if they don't come up with one, we can always say, hey, here's what works for everyone I work with. They get to some point that they realize they can't keep it all in their head. They got to put it down in a calendar. And so a calendar might work for you. What do you think?
So we have somebody else who said that their son, very much what you've been saying, Dr. Thomas, their son has been telling them that things are fine until obviously they're not, but it's too late to fix. And it's been happening for years. He passed one class last semester. Now he says things are fine again, but his parent feels that he has no confidence that his son's telling the truth and not just wishful thinking or outright lying. How do you get a student to come to the realization that they're repeating over and over and over, and they need to take a different look at what they're doing?
Well, so you don't have confidence that they're telling the truth. In fact, you probably have confidence that they're probably not telling themselves the truth as well. And sometimes it's when pattern behaviors and patterns of thinking are stuck inside of us, we keep repeating these in a real recursive negative way. And it's only when we get them outside and can see them graphically that they make sense. That there's every single time, every person I've ever done this curve with, when we start asking questions and filling in these blanks here, well, okay, what's the earliest warning sign? Well, what happened before then? There's this incredible aha that goes on where they're saying, whoa, yeah, I guess I can see how that's happened, and it's happened before, not just this last semester, but it's a pattern behavior. I could tell them that, but when they can see it graphically like this, they can tell themselves and stop lying to themselves. And oftentimes that's all that's needed. I would encourage you, just if you have this slide, you could run it off, or any of the slides, and set with your son and say, listen, let's think about what's happened here. Look at it like it's a curve. It's not everything's great and then it just drops off. There's some things that are happening early on, and you really haven't had the opportunity to tune into what they might be because you've been so focused on trying to do it differently or trying to be successful with it. Something like that. I don't know, how might that land with your son?
So one other question we have is general. Evan, if you want to give more information, turn your mic on and give more information. But he's asked, what strategies would you recommend that would help motivate your child?
Well, we've got a couple of different, that's a separate subject, like motivating, how to motivate a person academically. I'll give you a quick overview of it, but one of the greatest motivators is when a person can see and have some sense of agency over the patterns of how they're failing or succeeding. and that know that there's some possibilities of doing it differently. We call that the motivation of possibilities. In terms of motivation, it boils down to two categories. From the beginning, there's external motivation and internal motivation. And the thing that when your son was like, first started walking, external motivation worked very well. If you wanted him to move across the room, sit down on the couch, if he didn't do it, you just pick him up and set him there. But what happens over time is that external motivation becomes much less effective. You have less and less ability to motivate a person. But at the same time, ideally, there's this correlating internal motivation that's growing and rising up in this young person so that they can then motivate themselves. But a lot of young people don't realize how they motivate themselves. They happen upon it. And say, oh yeah, well that worked, I'll do this. Or sometimes they just do it unconsciously. But it breaks down. Internal motivation has two sides. One is desire and one is fear. We do what we do because we're afraid of the outcome of not doing, or we don't do because we're afraid of what will happen if we take an action. The other side of that is we do what we do. We put ourselves to the hard task of life because there's something we desire. So we use both of these motivations, forms of motivation, both fear and desire, all the time. And the way we activate them, the fear motivation, we say, well, what's the worst that would happen? Or what would that be like? And when we answer that question, just beneath our consciousness or in the back of our mind, it creates pictures and emotions. And these emotions we somehow translate them into action. Desire, we say, well, what's in it for me to do this? Like, what's in it for me to spend a whole semester of my life over the next 4.5 months focused on this coursework? And it's the answer to that creates a compelling future that draws a person into it. The problem happens when people get stuck in using a type of motivation that doesn't work for them. Like, I can tolerate a little bit of fear motivation, and then I just sort of shut down. I'm more of a desire motivated person. And knowing that, I can use that to guide myself. There's I don't know if this was mentioned at the beginning, but let me hawk a book that I published in 2019 called Thriving at the Edge of Chaos, Making ADHD a Superpower in College and Career. We talk about different types of motivation types that are unique to people with ADHD. And one of them is it could be for all people, but I find that they're very nuanced to people with ADHD. One of them is the motivation of possibility. When something looks like, there's really a way I can see through doing this. I can really make this happen. That's a powerful motivator. And so bringing it back to this curve, it's when people can see this stuff graphically and they can see, yeah, that I can see how I've been doing this, and I can see a way to doing it differently. That inspires hope and sense of possibility. That in of itself is motivational. That's kind of a quick and dirty on motivation. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. One other question that's related to the pandemic and so related to ADHD. A parent has said that their daughter is gaming and she can play for hours. Lately, because of the pandemic, her parent let her play more regularly. But now, as things are subsiding a bit, they're worried about her level of play and wondering what to do.
Whatever you do is going to be hard because it's always harder to claw back privileges once they've been granted. So somehow this needs to be brought to a level of self-awareness so that your daughter will see this as a problem, and it's not just I see this as a problem as a parent, but that somehow she can see how this is affecting her. What are the ways in the places in life that it's showing up in a negative way? And that's a very hard thing. Sometimes, especially in the pandemic, there's all sorts of stresses that people are experiencing: depression, loss of connection. And for a lot of students we work with, there's people that have entire communities. You're probably aware of this, but people through gaming on Discord and other platforms have a huge tribes that they belong to, groups of friends that they have never seen, that are maybe on the other side of the world, but this is their source of connection. So as much as gaming, people are also connecting with friends and making friends, and that's filling a terribly important need that is going unfilled, that's in fact being interrupted. The filling of it is interrupted by the pandemic. So what before the pandemic was real three-dimensional kind of connections, we're now experiencing more and more, just like we are tonight. We're meeting two-dimensionally, and that's great because it saves driving. And there's groups I belong to that I would never see people because they're in different countries. Just, so there's a balance to be struck in that, between what's possible for connection and presence here in the here and now, three-dimensionally and two-dimensionally. And so the point of this all is that it would be good to see what sort of needs this is filling with your daughter, and maybe have a conversation about what are some other ways she could have those needs filled. What can you help her to do in terms of making moving away from some of the amount of time online?
There's a follow-up question to that. What do you think about boarding school for a young ADHD student? This particular girl is a 5th grader now, will be in 6th grade next year, to help with motivation and moving away from the screens.
I think there's there are people that we refer to. I think Joan Whitten is in fact on this call, and could speak to the placement issues of like how that might be useful. From my perspective though, you're anywhere, if this person has a problem that is addictive in nature, no matter where you move them, it's going to be a problem unless they're moved to an environment that treats that issue. In fact, there's people I've worked with before who have a true gaming addiction. It's not like they're spending time talking to friends online. It's that they're playing games, and they to the point that they've lost weight, they've dehydrated, and needed to go to a residential treatment facility where they were treated for gaming addiction. So yes, and we have those kind of treatment centers now. So I don't know I don't know that will address the problem. And it would take knowing more about what the problem is. Is it simply a gaming addiction? Is it connection? And if it's a lack of connection, how would that boarding school, how would that resolve the problem, is the question that I would be curious of.
So
Thank you. That is everything we have at the moment.
thank you, Kathy. Turning back to the zone 3 failure, making sense of failure, Dr. Thomas, I'm going to hopefully advance the slide. The slides are still not advancing. Let me try this again. I think it's freezing up or something. Sorry, everybody.
We'll just kind of reposition us.
Here we go.
While Pam's dealing with the technical difficulties. Okay, so when people get into zone 3, that's failure. I mean, you failed. There's nothing you can do about it. You can, if you go in early enough, you can maybe get you can withdraw and avoid getting a failing grade. That many colleges will allow you to retake a course for redemption. You get the higher grade that you make, replacing the failure. But those are sort of practical things in terms of what to do with failure. Thinking about how failure affects students. Going back to what I said with those initial, the initial failure percentages, like 40% of students fail, but a vast majority of those never try again. Why is that? And a lot of it has to do with how that failure is processed. So if my son wants to race me and around the block, well, he's 20 and I'm late 60, and I come back around the block about a minute after him. Well, I feel okay about that. It's kind of like the way of thinking is, well, that's kind of like the way the world is, it's more like this outer ring that you see here. It's the environment. It's just sort of the way that humans are. And a younger person is going to have a far better chance of outrunning an older person or running longer than an older person. Even if I was in shape, it would take a harder toll on me. So it doesn't hit me at a deep level. And in fact, it's kind of funny and predictable. But let's say I fail a class, or I fail a whole semester. What does that say about who I am at this deep level of my being? So for my part, when I was in high school, I didn't know this until later. I have learning issues as well as ADHD, learning issues with mathematics. In my small rural school, we had the same math teacher for 4 years in a row. And toward the last few years, she kept saying the same thing to me over and over again. And it was something like, John, high school is going to be hard for you to finish. You're going to have difficulty getting through high school. I'm going to help you. So don't worry about college. All these other students are here thinking about college and talking about what they're going. You're just not college material. And, I would think, oh, okay, I guess so. But, my family had always hoped that I'd go to college. But that got down into my belief system at a core level where I started taking some of it on as a truth that was that I couldn't refute. And in time, of course, I failed my first semester, and I was like, well, I'm not, there you go, I'm not college material. That reinforced that belief. But at the same time, part of who I am is I'm stubborn and I'm persistent, and some level, I was getting feedback from a mentor of mine that said, "Now, John, you're a pretty bright kid. I don't understand why that happened. And I understand math. You don't know math, but what about all this other stuff?" And I began to rethink and reflect. So the point I'm making is that beliefs have a very powerful way of affecting. Failure has a very powerful way of affecting who we see ourselves to be in the world, the beliefs that guide my thoughts, feelings, and actions. In other words, if we look at these as concentric circles, a belief is going to affect how I interpret the world around me. And it's then going to affect my thoughts, feelings, and actions in ways that will reinforce my beliefs. It gets recursive. So what we want to do with a student that fails, if, I'm saying they're in college because they were vetted to go into college. They had the requisite intelligence, and they'd performed in ways that indicated that success was possible for them. So what we want them to do is to realize this is not a function of who you are. It doesn't need to be a belief. You need to see it more in the realm of the thoughts, feelings, and actions that you took or didn't take in the environment of college. So that's a conversation that's very important to have in a very paced sort of a way. so, so when we think about failure, when failure is inevitable, the first three things we said we wanted to tell you is that this is how do you avert failure? How do you stay in zone one? And how do you when failing, how do you pull yourself out of it? That's zone two. Zone three, when you have failed, how do you make meaning of it? How do you use that information to guide you? If we think about this as a thought, feeling, action sort of a zone, we want to get the student to start, paying attention to how these three areas, these thoughts, feelings, and actions, how they align them such that failure makes sense. Now, also, it's a good time to sort of inventory the beliefs a student has. A lot of students I work with and Pam works with are twice exceptional. In other words, they're, as you know, that means they're very bright and they also have something going on, a learning disability, ADHD, maybe on the spectrum. There's some more than one thing happening. And that for a very bright student who has ADHD, there becomes a lot of oh, thank you. That's a good slide for that.
Sorry.
So
I'm really trying to get this to work. It's being so pain.
hey, there we go.
There we go.
For a very bright student, oh, I'm sorry. That'll work fine. So they're hit with two realities. One is, okay, so I'm really smart and this material is very hard. So how do they make meaning of that? That's two different realities. Or I'm really smart and I failed. And trying to help them to incorporate and make space, make room for both of those realities is a very important conversation that ideally ends up something like, well, yeah, I am very smart and I have ADHD, and that means I need to do things differently. And here's how I need to do them versus, well, I guess, because I failed, maybe they made a mistake. I'm not that smart, or maybe maybe the test is wrong. Maybe it's the professor's fault. There's all sorts of different narratives that can come out of trying to make sense of that cognitive dissonance, trying to hold two conflicting realities, whereas really there's room for both of them. So let me just, this is just a quick look at how, I just wanted you to, it's a deeper dive into how beliefs happen. We're used to thinking, well, something happens and boom, I have an emotion. Like somebody cuts me off the road, boom, I'm angry. There's actually an interim step. And Pam, are you using is my cursor showing up as moving around?
No.
Oh,
Can't.
okay.
It doesn't work like that. Unfortunately.
Okay, can you read my mind and point to the ones that need, as I'm speaking to them?
I don't believe we can point to them. We can just
Hey,
tell.
there you go.
But you see this cursor?
Yeah, I can see it. Okay, so right there, what happens in reality is it's not just that we have an experience, something happens and we have an emotion. There's a space in between, a millisecond, where we make meaning of what's happening. We tell ourselves a story, and over time, stories become narratives. They get ingrained. It's like if I fail one course, I can tell myself a story. Hey, I just didn't work hard enough. Fail a second time or more courses, it's going to become more of a narrative, on and on to becoming a belief. And once it gets ingrained as a belief, or narrative, it begins to affect how we experience our experience, the stimulus. We'll be looking for in our experience for examples that reinforce our beliefs. So that's another reason why it's very, very important to kind of talk through a failure so that it does not become a belief, that it stays in a story, or at the very worst, a narrative sort of a place. because that's something that's open to changing a person's mind. They're open then more to rethinking their possibilities in the world. I think we threw these in because these are examples of other tools that we use to help students to come up with all the answers to what are the indicators and what are the antidotes. We will with students with ADHD, we find that the more we can have a model or a picture, the easier it is to have a dialogue about that subjective experience the student's having. So this has to do with stress, and we don't have this on here as an indicator, but I guarantee you, every one of the students we deal with the curve will bring stress in as one of their issues. So the way we think about it is like, okay, imagine you're pulling a wagon and you're looking forward, and someone comes in and puts an object in it. And well, you don't notice it because it's just one object, and okay, another object. And you know, it's something we accommodate to, and another, and eventually we become aware things are getting harder. There's something heavier that we're pulling. And oftentimes it's not until a student will get to the point they can't pull anymore before they look back and say, oh my God, where did this all come from? And at that point, people react in a lot of different ways. Some students just throw everything out and get angry and just dump it all out. Some will keep pulling and imagine that they can make it. They can pull it all the way to the end, even though they can't. Some will just give up and sit down and say, I can't go any further. What we try to teach them to do is as part of this monitoring process, is early on, we'll ask the question, what's in your wagon? Let's inventory your wagon. And we even get into quantifying it. It's like, your wagon will pull 100 pounds. Tell me all the things that are in them, how much each one weighs, how much are you pulling total? And just kind of like objectifying it, simplifying it like that makes it sort of realer for them. And that's a part of the zone 2 that we really want to stay on top of, because there's many things we can do when we have the energy, and we can even go beyond our capacity. We can surge against our capacity for a short period of time, like maybe the last few weeks of a semester. But if a person's going into the semester and they're carrying bunches of extraneous stuff, things maybe that aren't, for example, it could be that they're gaming. Gaming may be what fills their wagon. They may be spending large amounts of time gaming, or they may have relationship issues that are filling the wagon with emotional kind of issues. So monitoring, just another tool for stepping back and looking at what's going on and what's taking the energy from me.
Very good. I believe that we are towards the end of our presentation, and I don't have a problem backing up into any of the success curve if anyone has a question of looking at another slide of that, if need be. I guess we'll just stop share for now.
Yeah, that's all we have for you. Do you have questions? Oh, here's a good one. I saw, if a student is pulling the wagon in high school, but has a good GPA, how do you make an assessment that they're college ready? So it's a good GPA. There's a lot of ways, places to go with that.
Can I answer? Can I?
Please jump in. I know what you're going to say. I can probably read your mind.
Maybe and maybe not. So I noticed in coaching that students who are struggle in college or even in high school is because the level of complicated materials in academia just keep on increasing. So say Somebody's in middle school, didn't even study, maybe cracked a book open the night before, has a test next day, gets A's, everything's great. But as they move into high school, or as they move in from high school to college, it gets very complicated and the work gets more difficult. So in this case, good GPA in high school, going to get vetted into the college of their choice, going to be great. But when they hit college, it's a whole nother ball game. And that wagon is going to be blowing up to a degree where the student will have to have some things in place in order to be able to manage it. It's, independent living skills, it's emotional management, it's socialization. Should I join clubs or a fraternity, or should I not? Am I on campus? Am I living in an apartment? What is my roommate like? How do these things affect me? Where will I go study or learn? How will I put myself in a good academic place in a completely different environment than home and the things that I know? So it would be a good thing to have that student start to learn how to use the curve and learn how to manage life, work, and when I mean work, I mean school types of balances, and be able to monitor that and get ready to launch into a college or the next venture in their life, whatever that may be, because it's going to get complicated. So yeah, definitely.
So in addition to what you said, thank you. I did guess what you're going to say, but yeah, they think college is more complicated, and there's far less structure and support available than there was in high school. But also think of product and process. High GPA is the product. Process is, how is the student doing how are they accomplishing this high GPA? If they're waiting till the night before something is due and they're procrastinating like this, or the end of the semester and they're pulling it all together, that usually won't work in college. That's where people kind of get pulled up short. Sometimes they're accommodated. Some students are accommodated in high school and they're able to function very well academically. But if they don't have those kind of accommodations and if they can't get them in college, that may be an issue. So what would be important would be to look at what's working, what's the process that's working, and how can that be carried with them into college, into the more demanding, less structured, less supported field of college.
So John, we have a question with 40% is a big percentage for students to fail out of their first semester. What should give us hope that going to college has good prospects? What are the characteristics of the 60%?
Well, one of the characteristics I can speak to personally is they're stubborn. People who fail some of the 60%, 40% who fail, is what's most important, I believe, is the ones who pick themselves up and go forward after that. And that's where the hope lies, because we're always going to make mistakes in life, and it's important that people learn that early on, that you're going to make a mistake and learn from it, learn how to avert and how to overcome based on that mistake. So that's what gives me hope, is when we have a large percentage of the students we work with are people who failed the first semester of college. And it just makes my day when I hear something good that they've done when they went back and they're going at it in a different way. They're using some new tools, and it just feels wonderful to see that happen. The other part of that is that the 60% are the ones that get it right the first time. And for the vast majority of those students, that's a good thing. I guess what I want to say, though, is that perfection, or getting it right every time, sometimes has its limits, because ultimately people are going to fail. And so learning how to deal with failure is an important lesson to have early on. The earlier, the better. but the characteristics of the 60% are generally, these are people who've been given a lot of room to function on their own. They've been given, the parents have progressively stepped back, made them responsible for their academics. They're there and present to them. If they need help, they will check in on, periodically at certain key points, like, interims and so forth. But for the most part, I find these are students who have been given opportunities to develop their leadership in their lives, and their emotional intelligence. They've been taught when they don't have certain types of organizational skills, they've been taught them, they've taken them on, they've been supported and encouraged in them, and then people back off. They scaffold those skills such that they can do it on their own. There's a time when the helper backs away.
And I'd like to also enter in the scaffolding conversation. So many of these students get vetted into four-year colleges of their choice, and they're not quite ready to leap into that larger fishbowl. Wisely, some parents can assess that their son or daughter isn't quite ready to take that step and may defer the first year, and have them practice college in a community college setting. And that way they have the opportunity to practice college. They definitely are coming home every night, and they're still at home, but they are learning different skills and putting those into place, which is important, because it's easier to have the mistakes and failures in a community college environment rather than the 4-year, which is a lot more devastating for everybody for all different kinds of reasons.
But that's come up as a question. Let me just jump down. There's a gap year question. Let's come back to that. But what do you think about going to the community college route first? And for many students, I beg parents to do that. Say your son, your daughter is not, in my judgment, ready to go away to college. They don't have that level of skill, of life skills that will that they're going to need to function away from home. If you think about it, there's a lot of things going on at one time at this developmental epoch. The person is establishing themselves as autonomous from their parents, and an independent entity, geographically and psychologically separate from their parent. They're learning to get along in a very different kind of a setting, far different than high school, and they're on their own to do many of the activities of daily living that maybe they had some support for at home. So this is a whole lot of things to do at one time. And community college is an excellent opportunity for people to just learn that just the subset of a different way of learning, a different structure of education than high school. They can get that. They can develop some more autonomy and in how they build their life around that college experience, and then later move away to college. And they're just doing the geographical, psychological separation from parents. They've gotten a lot of the college idea down. So while many students they're ready to go away to college across the country, there's also many who would benefit greatly from going to community college. And in fact, there's times where we may recommend that to parents, and ultimately that's where they wind up. They fail and come back home and wind up at a community college, and that's where they get it together. So yeah, I think that can be a great idea. Let's see, gap year.
Somebody was asking if a gap year was a good idea. And then if so, how do you structure a gap year? And I'd like to say, I wish it was mandatory in our American academic world that every high school graduate, excuse me, would go on a gap year. Just take a break from everything, but I'm not saying have a party and go, like some others said, does that mean he will be living in my basement for a year? No, hopefully not. A structured curriculum of some sort, or some kind of an arrangement where that young person is diligently seeking next steps in their lives. Maybe they're doing volunteer work, maybe they get a job, maybe they're on doing some kind of work abroad, but exploring. I think that's an important thing, especially people with ADHD. Academics are just exhausting. They're just burned out by the time they get out of high school. And I think gap years are wonderful things if they're structured. What is your opinion, Dr. Thomas?
Well, you put me to mind of what they used to do back in the early centuries of Japan with a samurai. After they went through intense, rigorous training for long periods of time, they had a period of time where they had to put the sword down for a year and take up something completely different, like calligraphy or flower arranging, so that they let all of the learning settle into their mind, in the back of their head, and they came back to the art and skill of the samurai anew. So in some ways, some students do need that kind of a break, just to let all this settle in. And passively speaking, just whatever they're doing, they're going to be a year older. They're developmentally, some things are going to be happening. So, but I don't recommend that nothing happen. If a student is going to, it makes sense for them to have a gap year. What would make sense would be to look at the kind of skills that they're needing to develop and work on for independent living. What can they do that helps them build a sense of autonomy and efficacy in the world? What can help them with the ultimate geographical, psychological separation they're going to have, or autonomy they're going to experience when they do go away to college? So putting together experiences like that would be something like, like a job, or traveling somewhere for a particular, like Outward Bound was one of the great sort of almost rites of passage for young people out of high school, and a couple of programs like it. But a gap year would be is a good idea for many students, but it needs to be, I think, in a time of enrichment and growth, not one of just chilling out.
Yeah, and something that's structured. I'm sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
No, go, Pam.
Because I'm also ferreting around on the chat. I'm kind of jumping over you, Kathy. There is a student here said that he had he's been in a gap year, but he highly recommends that anyone embarking on a gap year should have a plan of attack early on, like at the beginning, with a real plan, or else there's a lot of sort of like wasted time and floundering around, as he said, and I agree. So yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Kathy. Did you have something else?
There was one other person that, in kind of extending that gap year, asked if somebody is home either by choice or by imminent failure from college, what do you suggest they need to do prior to returning to college?
Let me see if I can find that. If a person has failed, I think the most important thing for them to do would be to do a deep dive into understanding how they failed, what happened, where did they get off track, what skills, what aspects of them, what gifts did they not bring online, and what stopped that, and just kind of vis-a-vis what we've presented here, to get a graphic look at how they failed, and maybe look back into some of their successes, academic successes prior, that led them to college, and see, well, what is the structure of success, and then compare the two. And again, sometimes I feel like this could seem oversimplifying, but when we get a look at something, we can have a picture of something outside of ourselves. It creates a whole lot of clarity, and I find people oftentimes just, you know, that things make sense to them in ways that they had never even thought of before.
That is everything we have, Pam and Dr. Thomas.
Pam, did you send out the curves for
Yeah.
people to do themselves?
So I sent on the Eventbrite reminders that came out today, there was a attachment, or yes, you know, it was like embedded in the image. I think you can yes, you can download it. There was a black and white version of the success curve with all the lines and everything for people to, you know, use for their own use. And someone just put in the chat that they were unable to download it. So what I'm going to do is send it via the Northern Virginia CHAD email, and as an attachment that you can then download as many pages as you like, and write up as many different success curves if you like. I mean, we did this for an academic. Just think about an adult in a business setting. You know, where do you find yourself slipping down zone 2 at work? We want to show up to be your best. Maybe you're not doing the work that I've got adults that I work with who are work from home and are working very hard to sort of create a work day and not drift off into YouTube land or do something else, you know, because the work is stressful or boring, and then they want to just, you know, get the dopamine fix. So they can always look at the success curve and say, wow, I really, you know, I start slipping into zone 2 when I start making a lot of phone calls or start, you know, doing this or that. And I realize that that's a problem. And then, okay, so what could be an antidote to that indicator? And that would be brainstorming time. I can suggest things that I've heard of or know. They can, and I'm telling you, people can come up with some of the most amazing antidotes to indicators that I've ever seen. And, you know, the ADHD family, you know, they're very smart and they clever and creative. So there's always something interesting that I learned from my clients. So that success curve can work with chores, academics, relationships, work. It's really pretty versatile.
Thank you for mentioning that, because, you know, I was just all focused on college, but you're absolutely right, Pam, that we use this with people with project management in the world of work and in relationally. It's a good tool as well. So thank you for remembering that.
No problem. But we will make sure that okay. Some other people said they were able to print them out, but we'll just make sure everybody gets that and all that. And the recording and the slides, handouts and things will go out to everybody who are registered. And the recording will be available on the CHAD channel, their YouTube channel as well, for anybody that wants to listen to a portion or share it with someone who could benefit from this information. So thank you for coming, everybody.
So we would like to thank Dr. Thomas and Pam Barton for their wisdom tonight. Behind Pam, you can see contact information, and please go to ADHD College Success to their website if you have any further questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you next month.
Thanks so much for coming to our lecture. We really appreciate your
Thank
time.
you.
You know, if people aren't aware of what's happening next month, we have Joan Green on March 8th, and she's going to give us an update on tech tools and features that you may not know exist that make life easier.
I am so excited.
Yeah, she's great.
Awesome. She's my go-to for finding out things to help my students and everybody. She's great.
Yeah, and parents love her because she usually has some ideas, I think, about how to control technology for kids who tend to, you know, maybe overutilize technology.
Mm-hmm. Just wait for people to go. Hang on here just for a minute. I see that. I want to say hi to Jay. I think I know Jay. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Hi, this is Jay. Thank you for the lecture. Really very informative.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. I have to say that we had our dog barking outside, so that was distracting.
Ugh.
I had to text Morgan to ask him to go away. So it looks like the only people left in the room are us. We had little technical issues tonight, but I don't know. Hopefully it went all right.
I'm gonna act very distracted right now because I have a client who's texting me. She's having a little bit of an issue. So I'm gonna say goodnight and try to attend to this.
All right, Terry, thank you.
Good
for
night,
coming.
Terry.
Bye, ladies. And Guy.
Ladies and Guy.
First of all, I want to say I thought that went really well. I mean, I know there was some technical difficulties, but you guys really got the point across. And what I came away from it is what you guys said over and over again, which is why I remember it, that you have to, when you do fail at anything at school or something else that didn't go the way you wanted, you have to look at the steps along the way that caused the failure and go back and look and then go back another step and go back another step and see what went wrong and try and pinpoint where it was. But you also have to look at a successful time in your life where you're trying to do the same thing and were successful, like maybe in high school, and look at all the steps. And, you know, in a lot of cases in our business, it's all the supports you had in high school, like especially the ADHD kids, their parents are doing everything for them.
That's true.
You know, they're getting all these supports and then they go to college and they're not going to the Office of Disabilities and they're not talking to their teachers. And by the second week of school, they're doomed. They don't do those things. And parents don't know what's going on because the kids don't tell them. They say everything's fine. But like you both said, they learn from their mistakes, just like we all do, and they will come back. And I just thought it went really well. I got a good feeling for, you know, like how people who feel like they're out of control and they failed can get back and be in control.
Thank you.
It was, great. I mean, Pam, I could see you being like, oh, it was fine. And like the slides were there most of the time and they were good. And I agree with what you said, Cheryl. People were sticking with it. People, you know, like normally we have people coming and going. Everybody was staying. And so, you know, people were wanting to hear this, and seeing the progression, I think, was easy for them to see where do you have to make adjustments.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank God for Canva. I live in Canva, that's all.
Yeah.
A lot of the slides.
I was thinking I was scheduled to do the April presentation on college supports, but I feel like it's not a good time for that because we just had this one on college. And I feel like what Kathy said about the SAT, ACT being on people's minds because of the upcoming changes, that if you could get that guy, Kathy, in April, that'd probably be a good time for it.
When are you supposed to be speaking, Cheryl?
I am. I'm willing to.
No, what date was it?
It was the second Tuesday in April. Yeah, I just think it would be more appropriate to talk about SAT and ACT since that's in the news and it's on people's minds. And
Well, we're
have an expert,
talking about
have an expert do that.
having two separate, right? Like yours and then having an additional one in April wouldn't be a problem.
No, I was thinking I would not do it right now.
Oh, I see.
I feel like the timing isn't good because it's a little bit redundant about what you guys talked about today. And I just think maybe I'll do it another time or I'll think of something else to do another time.
So April 12th, we're talking.
Yeah, if the guy can come.
I will ask him.
Something on SAT also, but he seems like the better choice because
He's fabulous. He's
because
so
that's
smart at this.
that's his expertise. So I would choose him over me.
he's tapped into SAT and AC, like directly contact
Yeah.
with them. So let me call him tomorrow and see if we can do it, and I'll just email everybody.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay,
Wonderful.
perfect.
And because Kathy, you did say you've been getting calls of people concerned about the changes that are,
I've gotten more calls on this, and people are sending me, that original piece that went out with what's this going to mean to the junior class? What are we going to do about, so many of the online platforms for testing don't allow you to move backwards and forwards. And that's a huge question parents have with, are the kids going to have to move forward and not be able to go back like they normally do with extended
they
time?
can, I know they can go back because I researched it.
Have they said that? Because what I read, they haven't made final decisions yet on what it's going to look like.
I read somewhere that they're going to be able to go back.
Good.
But, we don't have all the information yet. We just
Well,
have.
but I know he has spoken to them, and he's spoken to ACT about when they're going to now make the announcements, because they're going in the same direction.
Well, I'm really happy with the changes, actually.
I
think
am too.
online is better. And also 2 hours is better than 3 hours. It's really hard for kids to focus for that long. For people who have trouble focusing, it puts them at a big disadvantage compared to the other kids.
I agree. Okay, yeah, I'll call him and ask him.
Okay.
Well, I think Thea is still recording, so we'll have to trim.
No, well, you're going to have to delete a lot of that.
Yeah, it'll just have to be trimmed on YouTube. I think that they can trim it off easily. I think she got up and left. Thea, you're not there anymore. I know you're not. So
No, she's not there. Something happened. You forgot she was recording.
yeah, it's still recording.
But
but,
Terry started before I let people in.
Thank you
She's
so much,
not
ladies.
as fast as she is. I'm a little bit older. And she didn't look to see that the people were there before she started.
It was all good. It was great. I'm going to go eat dinner, everybody. I will talk
Okay.
to you tomorrow after I talk to Alex.
Okay.
Have a
Thanks.
wonderful evening, everybody. And
Thank you.
See you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye, everyone.
thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight.